Hey everybody, it's Charlie from Daily Motor, and I have been particularly excited to get time with the all-new 2024 Kawasaki Z500. The one you're looking at right here is the SE model. Technically, all the Z500s have ABS in their name as well here for the States because they all come equipped with ABS, so I'm not going to include that in the name. But there are the two ones. There's the base starting at, 5,600 after destination, and then this one, no, I think it's about 5,800. And this one's talking about 6,500 after destination. A little bit of wiggle room maybe on those prices. Please forgive me. But what's important about them is that this is one of the quintessential beginner bikes. Everyone likes to look up on YouTube and the internet, what's the best beginner motorcycle? And truth be told, the best beginner motorcycle is one that you can ride and that you enjoy riding and that you can afford and then still afford to get yourself a helmet and some basic safety gear and training. But this is a bike that's billed from Kawasaki as a beginner bike. And they've got a lot of truth in that because it's an approachable amount of power. And when you're looking at here, 51 horsepower, 37 pound-feet of torque out of its 451 cc parallel twin motor, which we'll talk about more as we're riding. In the EU, this one gets you under the A1 license, so you can actually ride this as a beginner bike in that sense. I think it has to be detuned slightly, like 47 horsepower or so for the EU market, but it's priced fairly competitively compared to a lot of the beginner bikes, if you will. But one of the things outside of power levels and pricing and size that make it a beginner bike in my book is that it's just so gosh darn easy to ride. So that's going to be our focus today as we go out for a test ride here, is just what makes the Z500 so approachable. Now, I actually have never ridden a Z model before this. I've been curious about the Z400, heard a lot of good things, and I've sat on them in the dealership, but this is my first Kawasaki partnership. Fun fact, their headquarters is just about, a few miles up the road there. Maybe we'll even ride by it on our review here. But I'm going to get time with the Z500, and then after that, the Ninja 500, also updated for 2024 model year, and then the Eliminator, and then the KLX 300 SM. So, if you're interested in any of those, be sure to stay tuned, subscribe, all that good stuff. But some things around this one. So, I guess before we even get on, like I said at the beginning, there's two different models, the base and then this SE. The SE gets you these fancy colorways. You got the frame in there is painted red, the wheels are this candy apple red. Bit on the fairing as well, gets you this little bit of a smoked windscreen, gets you an updated TFT gauge cluster, which we'll see once we start the bike up. This is a bit important to me from the beginner side of things. It gets you frame sliders built right in so that if you were to dump the bike onto its side, it would protect the plastics and the engine bit and just scrape this up, which is super easy to replace. It also gets you a radiator guard under there. It gets you, technically speaking, it removes the passenger seat and gives you a plastic fairing, but I actually asked them to keep the passenger seat here for me so that I could give Alyssa rides, and I could also sit on the back of it there for you to kind of give you some passenger seat impressions. And spoiler alert, you sit very, very high up as a passenger on this bike. You can see the difference there. You can get to see well over the rider's head, which is kind of cool. And the SE also gets you a little bit of these tank grips right here. So in my eyes, it's not worth paying the extra bit for the SE model. I mean, I do really like the way it looks with the red, but the main things for me that I would put on here over the standard model is the frame sliders, and you know what, that's probably about it. The TFT definitely is nice. I'm sure it looks a lot better than the standard one. I haven't seen the standard one in person. But the rest of the things, the windscreen and the tank guards and everything else aside from the protection, I could take or leave that, and I'd rather just pocket the cash for a cheaper bike like this. One thing I do really appreciate, and a lot of you newer riders are going to appreciate as well, this is a helmet lock. So if you take the key, throw it in right there, that pops open. You can put the D-ring of your helmet right in there. So if you run into the store or a restaurant or the gym or anything like that, you can throw your helmet on there and it's locked up. You also have a tiny bit of under-seat storage under there for maybe a small toolkit or the manual. But other than that, you're probably going to want to be wearing a backpack. And this would be a great integration for me to show off my Helite backpack. But I'm actually not wearing it today. I'm wearing the Helite vest because I am lacking an air canister for my Helite backpack. But if you do think that you want to have a little bit of extra protection and some stowage, check out the link below for 10% off anything at helite.com. I typically ride around with my Helite backpack as a way to have water accessible, some extra storage, and airbag protection. I am a firm believer in the products. You can see our TFT gauge cluster up now. You can actually pair up your phone in order to control music or get phone call notifications or check a few basic kind of status updates on your motorcycle from your phone using the Rideology app there from Kawasaki. But the main things you need to know is you can actually change the background there. You can make it kind of a white background. I prefer the looks of the black. And you can also cycle through a few things like engine temp and tripometers and odometer and what else here? There's average fuel, range, average speed, total time since you've reset, battery voltage, instant fuel economy, some of your basic things there. You also have a clock, which is obviously useful. No outside temperature, though. That would be a little bit nice to have. Bringing the motorcycle to life, and we get right into some of the easy riding elements. Very light motorcycle. Oh, I forgot to look up the weight before I left here. I want to say it's about 370 pounds, but I'll put the proper weight here right below. Either way, it is a particularly light motorcycle, and it's got a slipper clutch and an assist clutch, which make it it's so easy to let out the clutch of this bike. It's very light, and it's one of the few motorcycles that I don't think I have ever stalled. I mean, oftentimes you'll know if you go from bike to bike to bike, you got to learn the different bite points of the clutches and kind of how much throttle it needs to get going, and it's natural that you'd stall it every now and then while you're getting comfortable with it. But this one, no, never. You can look at this. I can let the clutch out with no accelerator twisting, and it takes right off. Not that that's super uncommon, but it's just the fact that it's so just, here, come from a stop. It's so forgiving as a bike. And then because of the rake, because of the lightweight, because of the small frame size, it's so easy to just ride it around. The handlebars happily turn, the bike kind of falls to the side. Honestly, it's borderline, I don't think I want to use the word twitchy, but it does steer very light and easy. And some of you, perhaps getting off a longer frame motorcycle, might find it a bit unnerving at first that it's just so happy to turn the handlebars. It's not really a relaxed, kind of just fall into the bike sort of riding experience. It's very tight and happy to turn around. Of course, because we do have that standard ABS, you can squeeze the brakes as hard as you want, right there, and the ABS activates and keeps you from locking up either of the wheels and tires. And I'm a firm believer in ABS. Some people like to say, oh, I don't want ABS because I can brake faster than the ABS can if I use threshold braking. And yes, that is true. But what you're forgetting and not accounting for is that you can still threshold brake on an ABS motorcycle. So I can still kind of come down and try to threshold brake there and not get into ABS and still stop significantly quickly. However, the few times that I've had emergency braking situations on my motorcycles, including one crash, I've seen the situation unfolding in front of me and simply grabbed a handful and a footful of brake right away. That's the main thing I do, is just grab and squeeze. It's an emergency sort of instinctual situation. It's very rare that you're going to have a situation in which you detect a problem in front of you and then you're going to think, okay, I'm going to threshold brake and know exactly how much brake pressure to apply here on this surface at this speed. I would rather just have the fail-safe of ABS to just let me lock them up and then see what happens after that. So I'm glad that Kawasaki is just making it mandatory here for the Z500 model. Speaking of Z500, let's talk 500 here real quick. This is a 451cc motorcycle, and somebody in the comment section for my fuel economy test on this video said cc creep is real. And they're right. I mean, Kawasaki started off with the Ninja 250 that they had for years, decades even, and that was plenty fine for this kind of beginner bike category. And I owned a Ninja 250 not too long ago. I purchased one used just to kind of see what all the fuss was about, and it was a fun little bike. I mean, yeah, it wasn't gutsy, but you could ring it out super high, and it was carbureted, and it was a fun and pure little motorcycle. And then they updated it with the Ninja 300, and then not too long after that came the Ninja 400, and now they're up to the Ninja 500. So now all of a sudden, the beginner sport bike has doubled in displacement, or it hasn't technically because this is only a 451cc bike. Really, this should be a Ninja 450, but I guess they claim that because they can round up to the nearest 100th, it should be called a Ninja or a Z500. But all that's doing is then creating an opening down there at the... Goodness, that BMW sounds like shit. It's creating an opening down there at the bottom for them to re-release another maybe 250cc motorcycle somewhere along the line. Not only does that BMW sound bad, it also smells bad, and that owner should feel bad. There it is, Kawasaki North American headquarters right here in Lake Forest, California, or Foothill Ranch, depending on who you're talking to. Some cool bikes in there. Let me tell you, you go into the the main office there, and they've got some heritage bikes and some of the new stuff around. They also got their jet skis and side-by-sides. Kawasaki's a cool company. They build a lot of cool stuff. In fact, I was happy to get to be working with them here because they have one of the most comprehensive motorcycle lineups on the market. So I'm really happy to be working with them. Anyway, off into the twisty roads with the Z500. Because the motor has been enlarged, even though we're not exactly getting much more power than the previous Z400, it's a gutsier power. You got a little more torque down low, and it just makes it so that, yeah, even though peak power is all the way up at 10,000 RPM, I can accelerate here down at 4,000 or 5,000 RPM and still get enough grunt to where I don't have to be at just the right RPM and just the right gear at any given time in order to pass traffic or accelerate up to speed. In fact, sometimes I even start the bike in second gear. This might not be the best time to do it, but let's see what happens. Usually I only do it when I've got a little bit of a downhill. Right there, yep. Off we go, and I'm already doing the speed limit. Sometimes I'm not a big fan of throttle-by-wire motorcycles. There's too much of a perceptible delay between when you twist the throttle and when you actually get response from the engine. This one is borderline. There's a very, very slight delay from when I flip the throttle, but it's close enough that it hasn't actually been a detriment to me. The guy likes to keep his armpits cool. The extra torque also makes it so that you can cruise in 6th gear fairly comfortably. So once I'm getting up above 55 miles per hour just cruising, I'm usually up in 6th gear. You can see at about 60 miles per hour I'm doing about 5,500 RPM, and there's still enough power that with the twist of the wrist I'm getting up to any other speed pretty much. Now while the engine is brawnier than the outgoing model, and it is plenty powerful enough to have fun with, it doesn't have a whole boatload of character. And that is one of my few qualms with the bike, is simply it feels appliance-esque from the powertrain department. One of the beauties about the motorcycling world is that there are so many machines that have character. That's a lot of times you spend your day-to-day commuting time in a car like that right there that is entirely devoid of character, and you can get away with it because you're listening to music or podcasts, or you got family in the car. I mean, you just got other needs with cars often. However, when you get time to ride a motorcycle, you want it to really feel like something special, and the engine in the Z500 just kind of, it just works. Now, the power band does allow for a little bit of character there in that there's a crescendo. It's not a perfectly linear power graph that just accelerates with no character to it. It's not like an NC750, but between the sound and the feel of the engine, it's simply acting as motivation to accelerate rather than any sort of feeling of being alive and dancing with me. And that's not to say that that's something that's very common in the motorcycle world these days. In the world of fuel injection and computer-aided this, that, and the other, fewer and fewer bikes are coming with boatloads of character. That's something that actually surprised me with the Honda Transalp, is that motor actually had some top-end character, and I being the 270-degree crank and everything, it had kind of a cool sound, and it's just a machine that I actually I really enjoyed spending time on from the powertrain department. I was kind of surprised that Ryan over at Fort 9 didn't care for the bike much, or at least wanted to kind of review it negatively, because I did find that it was a joy. But alas, the Z500. Even though the engine might be lacking in character slightly, the chassis certainly makes up for it, which we'll see here on some of these tighter roads. Because it's so svelte, you can just climb right up on it, tuck your knees in, lay yourself over the tank. The handlebars are really nicely positioned for that. Brakes are perfectly adequate for the price. Single disc on either side, but I mean, you're not exactly hauling down a lot of weight. I do love actually getting to shift through a few gears though before I'm going way, way, way too fast. That's the problem with big, high horsepower bikes these days, is you get through first and a half gear before you're doing higher than any American legal speed limit. You don't actually get to enjoy the whole rev range that you paid for. I like this kind of 50 to 70 horsepower range of motorcycle because you do get to use the whole rev range through multiple gears. You get to enjoy that, and there's a reward to being in the power band. Mostly because there's a penalty if you're not. Speaking of fitting on the bike, this bike is part of Kawasaki's Ergo Fit collection, in that you can purchase different elements, whether it's seats or handlebar adjustments or peg adjustments, in order to make the bike fit better for you. I'm a fairly straightforward, standard 5'10" male, and I fit remarkably comfortably on the bike, but if I were smaller or larger, I might want to take advantage of some of that customization, make the bike fit a little better for me. So quickly do you get caught back behind cars. And what's good about the Z500 is, even when you do get caught behind traffic again, it's still a comfortable bike. It's still a bike that you like to be on, and it's fun just kind of rolling it back and forth here and enjoying being out riding. That's such a big thing, is don't get too caught up on the bike's different specs, or which one's going to be the best bike, or, you know, what's going to be the most reliable, what's going to be the fastest, what's going to be the most efficient. The Z500 just wants to ride. That's the most important thing. I think Kawasaki would even rather you just be out and ride. They're not, at the end of the day, you know, they just want you to have a good time. They just want you to have fun. There's a woman with a dog on her lap. I don't know how I feel about that. What if you need to do a little bit of dirt road action on your Z500? Well, just because it comes with street tires doesn't mean that's impossible. You just got to ride a little carefully. Let's go do a quick dip down our dirt road section, and we'll get back to it. Now keep in mind, just because we have ABS doesn't mean we have any sort of traction or stability control, so this thing will spin out on you. But, as you can see, no problem going down a road like this. Just gotta be careful, keep your weight over the bike, counter lean. And then again, if we slam on the brakes, ooh, actually we have a lot of traction on this surface. They've they've oiled it recently, so it's much better than it usually was. There we go. There's some hardcore ABS action. Suspension's pretty darn good for this bike too, going over some of these bumps. I mean, it's not an area that feels cheaped out on. Don't have to worry about any sort of scraping on this bike, even counter leaning it heavy into the corners. Pegs are nice and high up. In fact, I would say they're a little high for a long day of riding. Taller riders, you might get some leg cramp action going just because your legs are really tucked up in there, but it makes for a nice sporty riding position. And I think most younger sort of riders who are going to be using something like a Z500 for longer rides, they're going to be okay. Just get off every hour and a half and stretch your legs, you'll be fine. If you live in a part of the world where lane filtering is legal, then the Z500 is excellent for that. Let's see, let's take the left side here. Obviously just as wide as our mirrors and handlebars, and being nice and light, I can walk it right through here, no problemo. And we are ready to go from the light. And of course, some of you are going to be curious of how the Z500 is on the highway. So let's head on up there. I don't know how well you're going to be able to hear me, so I'll be quiet for a little bit and then make some commentary at the end. We were able to cruise there pretty comfortably at 70, and then as you can see, there's the ability to get well into the triple digits of kilometers per hour. So after my time with the quintessential beginner bike, the Z500, I'm satisfied, if not blown away. It makes sense for the price point, for the market segment, for the type of rider and buyer, and the things that it offers. I do appreciate it, and admittedly, I mean, it's been my preferred motorcycle in my small fleet of motorcycles right now. I've also got a big cruiser, and I've got a little dual sport, and this is the bike getting most of the duty. So I've been putting it through a lot of sort of situations. I've gone on grocery runs with it, I've done spirited riding with it, I've done some commuting type riding with it. We did our highway fuel economy tests. I mean, we put this bike through a good amount of riding situations, and it's performed all of them remarkably proficiently. And I think that's the kind of strange element with the Z500 is that the styling and the brand make you think that it's this kind of like spunky, like radical, like punk rock sort of motorcycle, but the way it performs is actually very studious and very predictable and straightforward. And that's what a beginner rider is going to want. I mean, this is going to be such an easy motorcycle for getting confident in motorcycling. It's so easy to shift, so easy to turn, so easy to have emergencies on. It's even easy to crash with its crash protection and everything. So it's it's a bike that is kind of like, hey, cool, you know, I'm cool, look at me, but then also like, don't worry, man, I'm just playing around. Like, this is a very straightforward situation for me. So it's kind of funny in that, and I do respect and appreciate it for that character. The only downside is when you are ready to graduate to a motorcycle with more pizzazz and more character, the Z500 is going to get left behind. It's got enough power for me to ride it all throughout my life. I'd have no problem with this being my motorcycle in the garage. From a power or a handling standpoint, where I'd get bored of it is just the character. It makes too much sense. When I ride, I kind of want something that's a little bit goofy, a little bit silly. And you know, you could throw an exhaust on here and it would liven it up some, but that's really not going to inject it with the type of character that you get out of something from one of the more eccentric brands. But hey, that's why beginner motorcycles exist, right? To begin. So, very cool from Kawasaki. I'm looking forward to riding the Ninja as well. I'm kind of assuming it's just going to be very similar with a little bit different style and maybe a little bit different ergos. But if you want to get yourself a Z500, I'm sure they're sitting on dealer lots right now and getting scooped up. Or hey, go get yourself a leftover Z400 because it's just going to look a little different, but it's going to ride fairly similar. And we've got the fuel economy test and the no talking winding road ride if you'd like to see that. And we'll see you on the next one. I'm Charlie from Daily Motor, and as always, ride on.